充满各种的养老和智慧，三件长期从其的公共破坏，这也记得把至少5年8年以上。
First of all, make sure once again that you have given rise to the proper motivation, which of course should be to bring about the best possible benefits and welfare for beings through your listening to these profound Dharma instructions. Listen to these instructions with the wish at heart that you'll be able to bring about the awakening of good for all beings. Karma continues in his text, the union of Mahamudra and Dzogchen, with the words, keep pure all the vows and commitments that you have taken. This pertains to all the vows and all the commitments, all the samayas, for that matter, that we have ever taken from our teachers. All of these are to be kept pure to the best of our ability. So when Karma says, keep pure all the vows and commitments you have taken, he refers, among others, of course, to whatever vows of individual liberation we might have taken upon ourselves. There are first the so-called vows of a layperson. As everybody knows, there are 5 such vows of a layperson which one could take upon oneself, but one could by all means decide to only take 1 or 2 or 3 of them. It's by no means necessary to take all of these 5 vows. Even if one were to hold only 1 or 2 or 3 of these 5 vows, one could consider himself a lay person, a lay practitioner who has taken the lay ordination, so to speak. These 5 vows are, just to remind ourselves of them, the first one is not to take life, so not to kill. The second one is not to speak that which is not true, which means not to lie. The third vow is not to take that which is not given to you, which means not to steal. The fourth vow is not to behave in a sexually inappropriate manner, which particularly means not to go between people who are in an ongoing relationship. And the fifth and final of these 5 vows, of course, is not to take any intoxicants, including alcohol. If one were to decide to take any one of these 5 vows, no matter which they are of these 5, you could consider yourself a lay practitioner, and these vows are, of course, to be kept to the very best of your ability. Once we have put ourselves under the protection of the 3 jewels, of the 3 rare and precious ones as they're called, meaning Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, once we have taken refuge to them or into them, if we were to take any one of these particular vows, as the ones that we have heard so far, these would be considered the vows of individual liberation. These are vows which one takes for one's very own personal benefits, as opposed to other vows and commitments which might follow these, which one takes for the benefit of others. Then, of course, there are also the so-called refuge vows, which are to be kept to the best of one's ability. When one takes refuge into the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, then one vows or promises to the best of one's ability to not go for refuge or not place oneself under the protection of lesser worldly powers or spirits or whatever there might be. Once we have taken refuge in the Buddha, there is no reason whatsoever to do that anymore, so we abstain from doing so. Once we have taken refuge in the Dharma, the teaching of the Buddha, we commit ourselves to avoid, to the best of our ability, harm for others, to avoid actions which could cause others grief, damage, or anything of that sort. And once we have taken refuge or placed ourselves under the protection of the noble Sangha, the exalted practitioners of this teaching of the Buddha, we promise to the very best of our ability not to associate with those who hold wrong views, with those who act in harmful ways and who could possibly influence us negatively in such ways. Such are the three things that ought to be avoided once one has placed oneself under the protection of the three jewels, the three rare and precious ones. The things which are to be adopted in regard to the Buddha, if we were to find a representation of the Buddha of whatever type, a statue, a picture, a painting itself for that matter, regardless of their artistic quality, one might add, are to be respected as pure representations of the Buddha. And if, for instance, we would find such a representation of the Buddha or of the deity or of the teacher, for that matter, somewhere discarded thoughtlessly, somewhere in the dust, somewhere on the ground, then we ought to take care to pick it up and to put it in a decent, in an appropriate place, put it in a high and in a clean place where we could pay proper respect to that representation. Similarly, when it comes to any representation of the teaching of the Buddha, the Dharma for that matter, any text that contains Dharma information. Now, in Tibet, it was a tradition that all of the Dharma books, of course, were all written in Tibetan, and what other language would there be written but Tibetan. But nowadays, from the Tibetan and also from other languages, many Dharma texts have been translated into all sorts of other languages. We have English translations, German, French, Polish, Spanish, whatever language you might think of. There are many books in many different languages, many texts which contain Dharma information, which are ultimately nothing other than the word of the Buddha himself. These are to be respected accordingly. They're not to be left lying around thoughtlessly, inconsiderately, on the ground, in the dust. They're not to be stepped over, etc. and so forth, but they're to be treated in the very same way as representations of the Buddha. So whenever you find any book, any text that contains Dharma information of whatever sort, no matter in which language it might be, also place it in a proper place, place it in a high, in a clean place where you can properly show your respect for the content of these books or texts.
And public ending and in that young, and Songi Jason Joke, Nasa Babu, Nagi Yona, Yana, Tzumana, it's a bite. You're probably gaining a child like dog.
Similarly, for those who represent the community of the practitioners of the Dharma, who are commonly known as Sangha, it doesn't matter whether they wear red robes or yellow robes. Any type of Dharma robe, for that matter, represents in a symbolic way the Dharma robes or the followers of the Buddha who wear these Dharma robes. In that regard, it doesn't make any difference whether or not we consider the wearer of these robes to be genuine or to be possibly a fake. It's the robes themselves which remind us of the Sangha, which symbolize the exalted community of Dharma practitioners to us, and also therefore these are to be respected because of that they symbolize to us. And as holds true for representations of the Buddha himself or of his teaching, the same holds true also for those items which represent the Sangha. They are also not to be left lying around in an inconsiderate manner, but they are to be treated in a respectful way. In that regard, which adds whether you come across monks or nuns for that matter, also there no difference whatsoever is to be made. We could also show our appreciation towards those who, even though they might not have taken full monastic ordination upon themselves, nevertheless have taken the lay vows upon themselves, and who possibly might also have resolved to practice in a very intensive manner. For instance, those who have practiced the traditional 3-year, 3-fortnight retreat. These are, even though they might be lay people, they might not be ordained monastic practitioners, they are not ordinary people anymore like everybody else who inhabits the world. These are people who have made a resolve to practice, at least for that duration of time, in a very intensive and a very concentrated way, and that makes them special. So we could also show our appreciation to such kinds of people. In the early times of Buddhism in Tibet, there was a king who was known under the name Rinpoche. He was well known for having great devotion to all sorts of Dharma practitioners, serious Dharma practitioners. he had not only great devotion for the ordained monastic Sangha, but also for the lay Sangha, who were commonly known in these days as those with white robes and long hair, in Tibet. And occasionally there would be ceremonies which the king would attend. And the tradition at the time would be that the ordained monastic Sangha with shaved heads and red and yellow robes would sit on one side of the shrine room, whereas the lay Sangha, those with white robes and long hair, would sit on the other side of the shrine room. They would conduct their ceremony, and towards the end of the ceremony, when everybody would leave, the king, who had very long hair, very long locks, so to speak, that's the meaning of his name actually, he would open his hair and he would attach long white cutters to his hair, and thus lengthening it. And he would have both types of Sangha, both the ordained monastic Sangha as well as the white-robed, long-haired lay Sangha, walk over these. So in order to show his respect and his veneration for them and to receive their blessing in such a way. Therefore, we would also be well advised not only to show respect to those who are members of the ordained monastic Sangha, but also to those who are members of the lay Sangha, in particular those who have performed the traditional three-fortnight retreat, who would nowadays be that which in the olden days was the white-robed and long-haired Sangha. These are indeed not ordinary people anymore, and therefore we would be well advised to show some respect to these as well, to show some of our appreciation for what they have done. Now, in general, people in the West do not seem to have many ideas or many concepts about right or wrong, clean or unclean, and in general this is actually a very good thing. But occasionally this also leads to some sort of cultural misunderstandings or even accidents of that sort. For instance, when Westerners come together, and there are also groups of ordained practitioners, of monks or nuns, the necessity or the point of showing respect to them is often overlooked and often not even known or understood. And it often happens, for instance, that there is a row of monks or nuns sitting together in a shrine room, and Westerners, Western students coming in, trying to get to their seat or trying to get ahead in some such way, completely inconsiderate of these ordained practitioners, just run ahead of them or step over them, which in turn can cause some of these ordained persons, like monks or nuns, quite some distress, because this is actually quite a show of disrespect. Such things do happen occasionally indeed, and whenever that is the case, you will see lots of shaved heads turning towards the perpetrator, and there might be some people who are actually rather upset about it. This is for the most part indeed just an expression of our not having any such concepts, not taking these matters into consideration in any which way. So obviously it's clear that no harm is being intended by stepping over the rows of monks or nuns for that matter. However, those who hold on to these ideas, predominantly Tibetans nowadays, for them they are rather more considerate of these matters, and this constitutes quite a breach of etiquette, so to speak. While we sit here together and hear once again about these matters, we could use this occasion to learn a little bit along these lines, in particular in regard to the Sangha, in regard to those who represent those who practice the teaching, who represent the teaching of the Buddha in their own ways. We could, from now on, decide maybe to be a bit more considerate. Karma continues now to say, take and keep the one-day vows or commitment on the full moon day, the new moon day, and on the 8th day. Of course, it goes without saying that whatever positive or whatever virtues, commitments we have taken upon ourselves, whatever vows, etc., samayas we have taken upon ourselves, they should be kept pure to the very best of our ability at all occasions. But on top of this, to take these so-called one-day vows, Njung Né as they are called, which are very similar to the vows that you take during the fasting ritual, only just taken for the duration of a single day, it would be very beneficial to take these on these 3 particular days in the month, which are the full moon day, the new moon day, and the 8th day of the month, because during these days they are particularly beneficial. Speaking about these so-called Njung Né vows, which are the vows which are most commonly associated with the fasting ritual, these one takes for the duration of 2 days. On the first day of such a Njung Né, you would begin by way of purifying your vows, whatever vows you might have taken in the morning through the practice that is commonly known as sojong, and you would then commence the practice that you're doing during these days. You would also take lunch, but you would not eat in the evening of that day. On the next day, the full day of the Njung Né, again early in the morning you would do the purification of vows, and you would reinstate the vows that you were taking for the duration of this day. And this day, apart from the practice that is being done continuously, will also be characterized by your abstaining from taking any food, any drink, and by not talking at all. Only on the morning of the 3rd day, then, once certain ceremonies have been performed, we would then partake of food again and drink. So these vows, these one-day vows as they're called here, they are to be taken in a certain way after first having purified one's commitments and having performed this ceremony that is known as sojong for that particular purpose. And one would then take these vows until the sun of the next day has risen, or until it rises. Until that moment, these vows are valid, are to be kept. And as soon as the next morning sun rises, then the vows are completed. Then one can go about one's normal, one's usual business again. These are known as the Mahayana vows, which, if one takes them and if one keeps them purely, are indeed of very great benefit for oneself. However, the positive imprint of these vows, which is being left within our mind streams, so to speak, persists for very much longer than just the duration of that one day. To practice in such a way, to occasionally take such one-day vows upon oneself, is indeed very beneficial altogether, and the positive merits which are being accumulated through the taking and keeping of such vows will remain with us until we achieve awakening. The particularity of these one-day vows, which are known as Njung Né, are that one takes them upon oneself on top of whatever other vows, lay ordination or whatever else it might be for that matter, on top of whatever else one might have taken. And one would, for instance, during such a day, abstain from eating dinner. You would eat, lunch would be your last meal, and you would take nothing else, you would eat nothing else until the very next day. So when it comes to these vows themselves, which are they? These vows which you take upon ourselves for that particular period of time are eightfold, 4 of which we are already familiar with. The first 4, which are known as the root vows, so to speak, are not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, and not to behave in a sexually inappropriate manner. The 5th vow that we take upon ourselves for this duration is to abstain from any intoxicants, such as alcohol. The reason for this is that under the influence of alcohol we might become thoughtless and damage any of the other vows or cause harm. So therefore we abstain from taking alcohol or any other such substances during that particular period of time. A little correction concerning the first 4 root vows. The 4th vow of these, when it comes to Njung Né or Njung Né, is not only to abstain from sexually inappropriate behavior, you abstain from any sexual activity during these days, both during the Njung Né, the one-day vow, as well as during the Njung Né, which is the 2-day vows which come together with the fasting ritual. And then we have heard that the 5th of these vows is not to take any alcohol, so as not to become inconsiderate or unmindful of whatever one is doing. That would be the 6th. Now to the 7th, 8th, the 7th and 8th vows. No, hang on, that would have been the 5th. Now to the 6th, 7th and 8th vows. The 6th would be that one would not beautify oneself in any which way, in any special ways during these, for the duration of this vow. That means not to wear any perfumes, not to wear any makeup, not to wear any jewelry. The 7th of these vows would be to abstain from sitting on high and ornamented seats. The seats, the maximum height of the seat that one sits on should be a cubit, not higher than that, and it should not be ornamented in any which way with brocades or any other such ornamentation. And then finally, the 8th of these vows is the one that we have heard already, which in the case of the Njung Né means not to take any food in the evening, whereas drinking and talking is okay. In the case of the Njung Né, it would mean also not to take anything, not a drop of water, no food, not to talk during the second day of the Njung Né. So all of this together makes up these 8 vows, the 4 root and the 4 subsidiary vows. So very generally speaking, just to be said quite clearly, that to take such vows upon oneself, even for just such short durations of time as 2, is extremely beneficial. And the merit that is being accumulated through such, through the taking and keeping of such vows, will not only be for the duration of that short time, but will remain with us until we have actually achieved the awakening of Buddhahood for the sake of beings. Let it be said very clearly that the accumulation of such merit through the practice of virtue, of positive deeds, etc., is the very basis for our having achieved a human body, a precious human body, in the first place. And if we were to train ourselves occasionally in such virtue, even if it were just by way of taking such vows upon oneself every now and then, that would indeed become a possible cause for our being born again in a human form, so that once again we would have the possibility to again meet the Dharma and further our studies and practice from lifetime to lifetime. So therefore it is indeed very advisable to at least occasionally undergo such discipline. Yes, there are questions. Please